No modern tools, no family to lean on. Just two men far from home, armed only with an axe and their craftsmanship. In the 18th century North American wilderness, they staked their lives on building a home to survive. Good evening, friends. Tonight we travel back to the 18th century to step into the shoes of an overseas pioneer. Here, you will find not only the vast, boundless wilderness, but also the dream of a new home and the bond of a precious partner to weather the storms with you. May everyone watching find warmth in companionship and discover their own light as they move forward. If you are ready to hear tonight's tale, type dreams come true in the comments. Now, relax as the bell tolls and follow me into this era of resilience and warmth. In the mid-18th century, the winds of England carry the scent of soil and livestock, sweeping day after day past the stone walls of noble estates. Yet they cannot blow away the despair that has gathered in your heart for years. You are Ethan Cole, a 28-year-old commoner. Since birth, every inch of land beneath your feet has borne the crest of the nobility. Your hands gripping a woodworking chisel are covered in thick calluses, with sawdust permanently embedded in the creases of your skin. You exhaust yourself crafting furniture and repairing homes for the lord of the manor, only to be rewarded with enough black bread to barely stave off hunger and a few swallows of cloudy ale. If you remain trapped here, it seems you are destined to only ever dream of owning a piece of land, with never a moment's respite. In the dim light of a tavern, the idle talk of pioneers acts like a faint, but steady light piercing the thick darkness. The new world has endless wilderness free from the exploitation of nobles. If you are brave enough to venture out, you can have a world of your own. Your hand tightens around your glass. That night, you pull out a cloth bundle hidden beneath your bedboards, containing the savings of half a lifetime of frugality. The coins rub against your palm with the coldness of years gone by. You reach for the corner to touch your ancestral iron axe and your polished woodworking chisel. The wooden handles have been worn smooth and warm by the palms of generations. This is your only source of confidence in a desperate situation. There are no goodbyes, and nothing to miss. Behind you are no family members to worry about. Only endless oppression. You know that if you don't leave, you will live out your days as a grain of dust on this monopolized land, unnoticed and trampled upon. And so, before dawn, you pack a simple bag and step into the morning dew, beginning the journey to the port of Bristol. The road ahead is vast and full of unknowns, but it is far more worth pursuing than the dead end you leave behind. The transatlantic ship is like a floating coffin. The cramped cabins are packed with immigrants just like you, all far from home. The smells of mildew, sweat, and rotting food intertwine in the airless space, thick enough to make you cough. The 8-week voyage is a daily struggle between life and death. Violent waves hammer the hull, and seasickness makes it impossible to eat. Your stomach churns so violently that every bout of vomiting feels as though it might pull your very organs out. When a low fever takes hold, you lean against the bone-chilling walls of the ship, your body burning and your consciousness fading. Yet, you never let go of the axe handle. That warm, familiar texture supports you, reminding you over and over, you cannot die. You cannot fall here, thousands of miles from the new world, letting half a lifetime of hope go to waste. Those around you fall one by one, some swept away by waves, others consumed by plague. The sailors unceremoniously wrap the dead in tattered canvas and toss them into the churning deep blue water. The mortality rate on the ship is as high as 20%. Leaning over the railing, watching that life-swallowing blue, you feel that life is as light as a feather, fragile and easily broken. But your resilience is etched into your blood. You chew on hard biscuits that threaten to crack your teeth and drink brackish, cloudy water, driven by sheer stubbornness. You survive the ordeal. When the hull finally strikes the shallows of the North American coast with a dull thud, you stumble onto that strange land with the other survivors. A sea breeze carrying the scent of pine needles, and damp earth hits your face. You lean against a thick tree trunk, retching violently. But as you look up at the endless forest and the blue sky, you feel that all the suffering has found a home, and all the persistence has found its meaning. This is not the paradise you imagined. There are no fertile fields or tidy houses, only crude settlements scattered along the edge of the wilderness. The wooden shacks are crooked, their walls full of cracks, and the thatched roofs sway in the wind, as if they might collapse at any moment. The people you pass are gaunt and dressed in rags, their faces etched with exhaustion and hardship. Everyone is struggling just to survive, their eyes filled with the same fear, struggle, and unwillingness that you feel. You do not stay in the settlement. The land there has already been carved up by those who arrived first. What remains is either barren or filled with rocks, unfit for farming or building. What you want is a world truly your own, a place where you can take root and build a home with your own two hands. So, with your pack on your back and your axe in your hand, you venture alone into the vast forest. Towering pines blot out the sun, allowing only dappled spots of light to filter through the leaves. The birdsong is sweet, yet it hides unknown dangers. The howls of unidentified beasts echo through the night, shrill and terrifying, tightening your chest. You lean against a cold trunk, huddling into your thin, coarse coat. The cold wind whistles through the gaps in your clothes, making you shiver. For the first time, you feel a loneliness that pierces to the bone, as if you are the only person left in the world. But you never look back, and your pace never falters. You know that behind you is a hopeless homeland, and before you is your future. Even if the path is covered in thorns, you must take it step by step. You trek through the woods for 3 days. Your feet are covered in blisters from the rough bark and sharp stones, and every step is a sharp pain. Your lips are so dry they bleed, and your throat is too parched to make a sound, allowing you only the occasional handful of fresh water from a stream. In your heart, you remember the essentials of building a home: water source, orientation, drainage, wind direction, and building materials. Without even one of these 5, you cannot stand firm in this desolate wilderness. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a gentle light filters through the trees, chasing away some of the chill. Following the sound of gurgling water, you push through the dense underbrush to find a clear stream winding past. The water is so transparent you can see the smooth pebbles at the bottom. The soil on the bank is soft but not muddy. When you press it, it feels moist and well drained. No need to worry about flooding during the rainy season. You crouch down, touching the damp earth. As the cool sensation spreads through your fingertips, you carefully study the terrain, planning the location of your future cabin. Suddenly, a hearty greeting breaks the silence of the forest. It looks like we've both set our eyes on this treasure of a spot. You whirl around, your heart hammering against your ribs. Your hand instinctively flies to the axe at your waist, gripping it tight. Standing just a few paces away is a tall, broad-shouldered man with slightly curly red hair dusted with bits of dried grass. His face bears a few faint scars, marks left behind by time and hardship, but his eyes are bright and open. A sincere smile plays at the corners of his mouth, devoid of any ill intent. At his feet lies an axe, polished to a mirror shine, its blade catching the light with a cold glint. It is a twin to your own, clearly a well-worn companion of many years. He steps forward of his own accord, introducing himself with a grin. "I'm Finn O'Connor, a 30-year-old Irish immigrant. The famine back home took all my kin, so I struck out alone for the new world to try my luck." He crouches down, his fingers lightly tapping the earth, then points toward a stand of tall, straight pines to the north. His voice is certain. "A south-facing slope gets the most light. It'll catch the winter sun and stay warm. Those pines to the north are a natural windbreak to snap the teeth of the winter gales. The stream is close enough for easy water. Yet we're on high ground, safe from floods. And look at the oaks and maples nearby, hard timber, perfect for a sturdy cabin." As you watch him, the strangeness and suspicion in your heart begin to melt away, and you slowly loosen your grip on your axe. You return his greeting, and as you talk, it feels as though you found a long-lost friend. Both of you are lone pioneers, harboring the same dream of taking root and building a home after surviving immense loss and suffering. He is seasoned in wilderness survival and logging, even possessing knowledge of Scandinavian log cabin joinery. You, meanwhile, bring solid woodworking skills, an eye for detail, and a talent for finishing and repair. Your skills complement each other perfectly. Without needing many words, a single look is enough to know you are of one mind. You and Finn share a smile and strike a pact to scout the land together, build your homes side by side, and become neighbors. In this desolate wilderness, you will have each other's company. You will be alone no longer. Before the true building can begin, surviving the night is the first and most urgent priority. In the wilderness, storms can strike at any moment, bringing howling winds and torrential rain. Furthermore, the prying eyes of predators never leave you. Tracks of wolves and bears are everywhere in the timber. Without shelter, you are exposed and vulnerable, a hair's breadth from death. Finn's survival experience proves invaluable. He quickly locates two thick pines standing close together, their trunks straight and branches lush enough to support the weight of a shelter. He swings his axe with practiced, powerful strokes. With a sharp crack, a thick crossbeam is severed. Nimbly, he cuts several more heavy branches and wedges them firmly between the two pines, raising the skeleton of a shelter with efficient, effortless grace. You take the axe from him and carefully trim away the smaller twigs from the crossbeams, lopping off any sharp points to prevent injury. Then, you layer fresh pine boughs over the frame to create the first layer of roofing. The dense needles provide the initial shield against both the sun and the rain. Finn disappears into the thicket, returning a short while later hauling a heavy load of broad leaves, bark, and thick moss. His shoulders are weighed down, and his forehead is beaded with sweat. You take the materials and layer them meticulously over the branches, pressing them down firmly by hand. You stack them thick and tight, leaving no gaps, to ensure the roof is as waterproof as possible. As the sun dips below the horizon, a simple lean-to stands finished. It isn't spacious, but it's enough to hold two men. This is your first home in the wilderness of the New World, crude yet brimming with hope. That night, the storm arrives exactly as feared. Heavy clouds mask the sky, and a gale shrieks through the trees. Raindrops hammer against the bark roof with a rhythmic, deafening thrum, and the wind howls like a prowling beast. Though the shelter is humble, it holds firm against the brunt of the weather, with only a few stray drops seeping through the cracks to dampen the earth below. You and Finn sit back to back inside, a small campfire flickering between you. The dancing flames cast a glow on your faces, chasing away the bite of the cold and the oppressive dark. You share what remains of your hard bread and dried meat. The bread is rock hard and the meat has a slight gaminess. But in this moment, it is the most precious meal on earth. You talk of your pasts, of the land monopolies of the English gentry, and the long, weary days of being squeezed for every penny. You speak of the Irish famine, the heartbreak of losing loved ones, and the sheer desperation of the Atlantic crossing. But you also talk of the future of the cabins you will build, the crops you will plant, and a life where you are no longer under another man's thumb. His voice is hearty, filled with that quintessential Irish optimism and resilience. Even when recounting his darkest days, a smile never leaves his lips, as if all those hardships were merely passing clouds. In that moment, the terror of the wilderness, the ache of loneliness, and the exhaustion of the journey seem to evaporate in the warmth of companionship. You lean your head against his shoulder, listening to the storm outside and feeling the warmth beside you. Your frayed nerves finally begin to uncoil. This is the first night since arriving in the New World that you sleep with any measure of peace. In your dreams, there is a small cabin, fertile earth, and years that are no longer spent alone. The next morning, the storm broke, leaving the forest air thick with the damp, sweet scent of pine and earth. Bathed in the first rays of dawn, you and Finn forged a concrete pact. Each would build a log cabin of about 200 square feet, side by side, twin homes for twin souls. But there was a deadline. The North American winter is a merciless beast. Failure to finish before the first snow meant a death sentence in the freezing gales. This wasn't just construction, it was a race for survival. From felling the first tree to the final notch, you worked as one. Tasks that would have broken a lone man's spirit were conquered with ease through your newfound synergy. During the harvest, Finn's raw strength and deep understanding of the woods took center stage. He knew the secret language of trees, finding the perfect grain with a single glance. With a rhythmic thud crack, his axe bit deep and true. One by one, massive oaks and maples, the iron-hard bones of your future home, succumbed to his steady power. You followed in his wake, never missing a beat. As each giant fell, you were there to strip the branches and, with a craftsman's precision, shave the trunk smooth. You measured and cut them into uniform logs, 8 to 12 inches thick and 15 to 20 feet long. Under your chisel, the rough wood became orderly and exact, without a single hair's breadth of error. A log weighing hundreds of pounds is a killer for a man alone. One slip, and a leg is crushed. Together you improvised. You built simple ramps on the forest floor and snubbed the logs with thick hemp ropes. Finn took the front, his boots digging into the dirt as he steered the massive weight with a focused gaze. You put your shoulder to the rear, leaning in with every ounce of grit in your body. Feet in sync, breathing as one, you eased the timber up the slope and into position. The danger of a runaway log vanished in the face of your teamwork. Sweat soaked through your coarse linen shirts, gluing them to your skin. New blisters rose on top of old ones, and when they burst, the salt of your sweat stung like a hot iron. Yet, not a word of complaint was uttered, not a thought of quitting crossed your minds. Within days, 2 piles of 30 logs, each sat in the clearing, the skeletal promise of 2 homes. Looking at the fruit of your shared labor, you and Finn shared a weary smile, your eyes bright with the vision of what was to come. Foundation work is the soul of a cabin. You knew that if a log touches the bare earth, the dampness will rot the wood from the bottom up, turning a dream into a moldy ruin within years. You crouched in the dirt, sketching the layout with a twig, adjusting the angles until they were perfectly square. You suggested digging pits at the 4 corners to set massive foundation stones, hoisting the logs onto rock to shield them from the ground's moisture. Finn nodded in immediate agreement, his eyes gleaming with respect. Drawing from his years in the bush, he added, "That's not enough. The humidity here is heavy. We should dig a perimeter trench around the stones, a dry moat to carry the rainwater away before it can even touch the base." His practical wisdom filled the gaps in your technical knowledge. You felt a surge of gratitude. Finding such a partner in this wasteland was nothing short of a miracle. You set to work immediately. One man swung the spade, digging deep and wide, while the other hauled heavy river stones from the creek. The weight pressed painfully into your shoulders, but the work never faltered. No words were needed. A single look told you exactly what the other required. A foundation that would have taken a week for one man was finished in half a day. The stones sat firm in the earth, the trenches wound neatly around them. Your precision, paired with his experience, ensured that the first step was rock solid. Raising the walls is the most technical and dangerous stage of the build. Massive logs must be hoisted high, and the strength of the joints determines whether the house stands or falls. Here, Finn's knowledge of Scandinavian joinery became the key. For the first sill logs, you chose the thickest, toughest hardwoods, the bedrock of the entire structure. Together, you heaved the timber onto the stones, veins bulging in your arms, footsteps heavy and deliberate. You adjusted the frame until it was perfectly square, the true anchor of your future. When it came to the corners, Finn knelt down and took your chisel. His hands, rough with calluses, showed you how to cut a saddle notch, the perfect joint for a beginner. It was simple but incredibly sturdy. By carving a semicircular cup in the end of the log, you allowed them to nest into one another. They locked together so tightly that no nails were needed to defy the howling winds. With your background in carpentry, you mastered it instantly. Your chisel flew, carving clean, smooth notches that allowed the logs to bite into each other with 0 gaps. Finn watched your craftsmanship and gave a resounding thumbs up. Ethan, your hands were born for this. You're better than half the master carpenters I've seen. As the walls climbed higher, the work became more perilous. Using the ramps and ropes, one of you stayed below to anchor the log, preventing a deadly slide, while the other reached down from the top to guide it into the notch. Every glance was a silent conversation of trust. What should have been a high-risk gamble became a safe, orderly dance. The walls rose inch by inch, from a low frame to a towering fortress. They felt like a pair of open arms, ready to embrace the warmth and hope of the life you were building. The gaps between the logs were open invitations for the winter gales. Even the smallest fissure would allow the freezing wind to scream inside, turning the cabin into an icebox. And then there was the fireplace, the literal heart of survival. Without it, you couldn't endure the sub-zero temperatures or cook your meals. In the wilderness, the hearth is the soul of the home. Neither of you dared to slacken your pace on these two tasks. To seal the walls, Finn carefully selected small wooden strips and splints, wedging them into the larger gaps until the timber was packed tight. You gathered the fine sawdust from your woodworking and mixed it with damp forest moss, kneading it into a natural caulk to plug the smaller cracks. The moss served a dual purpose. It absorbed moisture and created an airtight seal. Finally, you both hauled over buckets of mixed clay. The consistency had to be just right, neither too runny nor too stiff. Using your bare hands, you smeared the mud over the exterior log walls, sealing every last pore. This layer of chinking acted like a warm suit of armor, locking the cold out for good. When it came to the fireplace, you hit a snag. Stones were scarce in the immediate area, nowhere near enough for a full masonry chimney. But you didn't give up, you adapted. You built a cat-and-clay chimney using a frame of the hardest, most fire-resistant timbers. Finn took charge of the mud mixing, using his experience to gauge the exact thickness of the fireproof lining. His touch was masterful, ensuring the clay was thick enough to prevent the wooden frame from catching fire. You focused on the finishing and ventilation, crafting a flue that allowed smoke to vent perfectly without letting the precious heat escape. As the last handful of mud was smoothed over, the hearth was complete. Looking at it, you could already envision the dancing flames of midwinter and smell the aroma of roasting game and baking bread. When the roofs were finally layered with thick, overlapping sheets of bark to shed the rain and snow, the main structures were declared finished. Standing in the clearing, you saw the two cabins side by side, nestled among the towering trees. They were rugged and simple, yet they pulsed with life and hope. You and Finn stood shoulder to shoulder, covered in mud and sawdust, sweat stinging your eyes. As your exhaustion gave way to a brilliant, beaming smile, you realized that the sweat dripping onto the dirt was finally watering land that belonged to you. At that moment, you knew you finally had a roof over your head and the foundation of a true home. The days of wandering and displacement were over. The cabin was standing, but that was just the beginning. There is a vast distance between having a house and having a life. Together, you and Finn continued to lean on one another, sharing tools, labor, and spirit, slowly transforming these crude log shells into homes filled with the warmth of a hearth. Bit by bit, the breath of life began to stir in this desolate wilderness. When it came time to make the doors, Finn was up before the sun. He disappeared into the timber and returned hauling prime white oak, a wood so hard and rot-resistant it was the gold standard for a pioneer's threshold. Using only his axe, he hewed the logs into flat, even planks, each one smooth to the touch. He carried the heavy load to your cabin, brow beaded with sweat, yet without a single word of complaint. You, in turn, reached for your cherished chisels and polished wooden pegs. You joined the planks with meticulous care, ensuring a fit so tight not a sliver of light could pass through. For hinges, you fashioned simple but clever pivots using strips of tough, supple leather, oiling them until the door swung with silent, fluid ease. Together, you hoisted the heavy door into the frame, adjusting it until it seated perfectly. Finally, you fitted a stout wooden bolt to the interior. Finn slapped the solid oak, the thud echoing with a sense of absolute security. "There," he grinned. "No beast is getting through that. We can finally sleep." with both eyes closed. For the windows, you had to innovate with what the wilderness provided. Since glass was a luxury of the world you left behind, you devised a substitute. Finn gathered thick, resilient paper, handling it as if it were gold to prevent any tears. Meanwhile, you rendered animal fat in a small iron pot until it was thick and fragrant. Using a makeshift brush, you applied layer after layer of the hot grease to the paper, creating greased paper windows. These translucent panes were strong enough to deflect the biting wind and rain while allowing soft golden sunlight to bleed into the cabin, chasing away the gloom. When you and Finn finally tacked them into place, the interior was instantly transformed. Dappled shadows danced across the floor, and the once damp space felt bright and alive. As for the floor itself, originally nothing but muddy earth, you worked together with spades to level and tamp it down until it was rock hard. You finished it with a fine dusting of wood ash. It absorbed moisture, kept the floor bone dry, and acted as a natural repellent against insects. You made a pact then. Once the spring thaws arrived, you would saw proper floorboards together and take your comfort to the next level. Simple furniture was the next necessity. Without it, a cabin is just a hollow shell. Again, you pooled your skills to craft the essentials. To build your bed, Finn came to your cabin to help, precisely boring holes into the corner logs to receive the heavy crossbeams. He ensured the frame was sturdy enough to hold a man's weight for a lifetime. You then took bundles of wild vines you had scouted by the creek, each one selected for its uniform thickness and flexibility. Sitting on the floor, you patiently wove them into a tight, springy mesh. Over this rope-bed foundation, you layered thick piles of dried grass. It was soft, fragrant, and springy, the perfect sanctuary to melt away the day's exhaustion. For the table and stools, you took the lead with your joinery skills, fitting the wood together with such precision that not a single iron nail was required. The tabletop was sanded until it was silky smooth, and the three-legged stools were balanced perfectly for the uneven floor. Finn did the heavy lifting, hauling the timber and helping you steady the pieces as you worked. Before long, your cabin was furnished with a bed, a square table, and 3 sturdy stools, raw and simple, yet filled with the pride of craftsmanship. Finn also used his spare time to weave several baskets from supple willow withes, each one intricate and fine. He handed half of them to you, saying with a laugh, "Here, Ethan, a place for your grain and your gear, so we don't live like savages with piles on the floor." You took the baskets, the smooth texture of the willow carrying the scent of the forest. Like Finn's friendship, they brought a sense of order and warmth that filled not just the room but your heart. In the wilderness, survival is never a solo act. A man's strength, no matter how great, has its limits. It cannot hold back every danger or weather every storm. As time slipped by, more pioneers began to trickle into the surrounding woods. Like you and Finn, they were souls adrift, driven by the same hunger to take root, each having survived the grueling Atlantic crossing and the early trials of the bush. On this untamed land, an unwritten code, a social contract of the wilderness, began to take shape. It was simple. If a neighbor is in need, you lend a hand without asking for anything in return. For projects too massive for one family, the community moved as one body. In the face of a cruel frontier, you huddled together for warmth, turning a cold wasteland into a shared sanctuary. Because of the craftsmanship and seamless coordination you and Finn displayed while building your own cabins, you naturally became the heart of this growing community. Whenever a problem arose, people sought you out, and you always shared your tools and your wisdom without reservation. Finn was the soul of the operation, gregarious, warm, and a natural communicator. He had a knack for spotting a man's hidden talents, organizing the chaos of a build, so that every hand was busy and not a single ounce of effort was wasted. You, however, were the mind and the hands. Your eye for detail was surgical, and your standards were ironclad. You oversaw the joinery and the structural integrity of every cabin. Not a single loose notch or weak beam escaped your notice. You ensured that every home built was a fortress against the winter and the wolves. One day, word reached you of an elderly pioneer living alone at the edge of the settlement. He was frail without kin or help, and the skeleton of his unfinished cabin stood like a mocking ghost as the first autumn frosts began to bite. The community watched with heavy hearts, but they lacked the direction to act. You and Finn didn't hesitate. You stepped forward to lead the build, vowing that no one would be left homeless when the snow began to fall. Finn divided the volunteers into crews, fellers, haulers, and diggers, turning a frantic crowd into a disciplined team. You stood at the center, patiently teaching men who had never held a chisel how to cut a saddle notch, how to stack a plumb wall, and how to seal a hearth against the draft. You and Finn worked like a well-oiled machine, two parts of a single mind, a nod, a glance, a silent gesture. That was all the communication you needed. Under your joint leadership, the pioneers fell to work with a fervor that defied exhaustion. There was no shirking, no complaining. By the end of the very first day, the log walls had already reached the eaves, 3 days ahead of schedule. When the old man looked up at the sturdy walls of his new home, tears traced the deep furrows of his weathered face. He took your hands and Finn's in his own, his voice cracking with emotion. Thank you all. Without you, the wilderness would have claimed me this winter. In that moment, the clearing erupted in applause. The sound echoed through the silent timber, sharp and bright, a symphony of human warmth against the encroaching cold. This act of mutual aid did more than just give an old man a roof. It shattered the icy isolation of the frontier. As you watched Finn laughing and discussing the next day's roofing plan with the men, and as you looked at the honest, weary faces of your neighbors lit by the setting sun, a profound realization hit you. The wilderness was no longer a cold, alien place. These people, bound by shared suffering and a singular dream, had become more than neighbors. They had become a family. Your home was no longer confined to the 4 walls of your cabin or the fence line you shared with Finn. It had expanded to encompass the entire community. Because of these bonds, and because of the sweat you poured out together, the smoke rising from the chimneys finally smelled of a true settlement. The wilderness was fading, and in its place, the warmth of a real home was taking root. The North American winter arrived with a sudden, brutal fury. It was a season that felt eternal. The wind screamed through the timber like a whetted blade, its icy bite drawing sharp pain from any exposed skin. Snow drifted down in endless, swirling sheets, draping the entire wilderness in a suffocating shroud of silver white. The world became a silent, frozen void, where life itself seemed suspended in ice. But your log cabin, and Finn's beside it, stood as the warmest harbors in that frozen sea. The mud chinking held firm, sealing out the howling gales inside. The hearth glowed with a fierce, steady brilliance. Pine logs crackled in the fire, a rhythmic melody of survival, as the heat radiated through the room, chasing the chill into the shadows. You and Finn visited each other often, needing no invitation. You'd simply push open the heavy door, pull up a stool by the fire, and share a mug of warm ale. That warmth would travel from your throat to your very bones, dissolving the frost of the frontier. You'd feast on dried game and the bread you'd stockpiled, trading stories of the forest and making grand plans for the spring. Looking out at the magnificent, hushed landscape of swirling snow, a sense of peace finally took root in your soul. The loneliness and dread you felt upon arriving had vanished. Your craftsmanship had made these walls impenetrable, and Finn's survival instincts had ensured your bellies were full and your woodpiles high. Together, you hadn't just survived the winter, you had conquered it. When the spring winds finally breathed life back into the land, the ice surrendered. It dissolved into gurgling rivulets that fed the awakening streams. The pines pushed out tender green buds, and the forest floor erupted with the first brave wildflowers. Spring arrived like a promise kept, flushing away the silence of winter with a song of flowing water and birdsong. After a full cycle of the seasons, your cabins bore the honorable scars of the wild, a few patches of loose mud, some weathered bark on the roofs, but they felt more solid than ever, as if they had grown out of the very earth they sat upon. True to your winter pact, you and Finn set out to upgrade your homesteads, turning your survival camps into a true home. Your lands sat side by side, separated only by a small drainage trench, making it easy to look out for one another. Together, you cleared a patch of ground for a shared garden. Finn, who had grown up with his hands in the soil of the old country, became your mentor. He taught you the ancient language of the seasons, how to turn the earth, how to judge a seed, and when to feed the soil. He knew which crops would brave the lingering frosts and which craved the direct heat of the sun. You followed his lead, learning with every handful of dirt. In return, you put your woodworking skills to use. You built raised garden beds from heavy timber, partitioning the crops with surgical neatness. You fashioned a high picket fence from split rails, strong enough to keep out the hungry deer and prevent your livestock from trampling the young shoots. In those beds, you planted potatoes, carrots, and cabbage, seeds of hope buried in the damp, fertile earth waiting to become a harvest. Nearby, you raised a sturdy coop of logs and brush, safe from the midnight prowl of foxes. Finn brought back a few chickens from a distant settlement, and soon the taste of fresh eggs, vibrant and rich, became the ultimate luxury of your morning table. To truly elevate your living space, you decided it was time to move off the dirt floors. Finn took the lead on the heavy logging, felling straight-grained timber and hewing it into uniform puncheons, flat-faced half-logs. You took over the precision work, scribing and fitting each plank to the next until the floor was tight and level. You pinned them down with wooden trunnels and planed the surface until it was smooth underfoot. The transformation was instant. The damp smell of earth was replaced by the clean scent of fresh-cut wood. No more mud in the rain. No more dust in the heat. Your home had become a sanctuary of craft. You went on to reseal the walls, patch the roofs with fresh shingles, and replace the wooden latches with stout iron bolts for true security. Finn built sturdy shelving to organize your gear, while you crafted fine storage trunks to keep your grain and clothes bone-dry. Under your meticulous care, the two log cabins began to breathe with the rhythms of a lived-in life. The garden beds flourished, a sea of vibrant green against the dark forest floor. Potato vines sprawled across the earth. Carrot tops grew thick and feathery, and the cabbages rounded into firm, heavy heads, pulsing with vitality. In the coop, the chickens kept up a lively chatter. The rooster's dawn chorus unfailingly woke the morning, while the hens provided a steady supply of fresh eggs, adding a simple, profound joy to your daily existence. On the windowsill sat bouquets of wildflowers Finn had gathered from the woods, not rare or costly, but blooming with a fierce, colorful brilliance that breathed life into the humble rooms. Your lands were joined, your gardens intertwined, and your two cabins stood facing one another through the timber like old friends. At mealtimes, twin plumes of wood smoke rose from the chimneys, weaving together in the forest air. That scent of home-cooked food became the most moving sight in the entire wilderness, a silent testament to the bond you shared. In the rare moments of rest, when the heavy labor was done, you and Finn would sit together on the large stones in front of the house, rocks worn smooth and warm by years of sun and rain. Shoulder together, you'd watch the distant woods and the birds dancing through the canopy. You'd look down at the soil beneath your feet, the thriving garden, and the poultry wandering peacefully in their pen. You'd look at the cabins, tracing the marks of the sweat and grit you'd both poured into them, and share a quiet smile. No words were needed. Your hearts spoke the same language. You'd remember the crushing loneliness and terror when you first stepped onto this continent. The days of wandering without a destination. You'd remember that first encounter by the stream, when suspicion slowly melted into the warmth of a new friendship. You'd remember the stormy night in the lean-to, the comfort of sitting back to back for warmth, and the grueling days of felling timber together. You'd remember the bite of the great winter and the laughter shared by the hearth. Those hard years and desperate moments, because they were shared with Finn, had been forged into your most precious memories, the unbreakable foundation of your friendship. You once believed that home was merely a piece of land to call your own and a roof built by your own hands to keep out the rain. But the years spent standing side by side with Finn, growing together, building together, taking root together, had rewritten your soul. you finally understood the true meaning of home. This land is the foundation, watered by your sweat. Every inch bears your footprint, and every drop of labor has nourished its soil. It is where your dreams have taken root. This log cabin is the vessel, built by your hands. Every log, every smear of mud, and every notch holds a piece of your spirit. It is the sanctuary for your body against the cold. But Finn, this boisterous, loyal Irishman who bled and toiled beside you, he is the soul of your home. He is the destination of your spirit. In this strange, vast land, he is your truest kin, your anchor in the dark, your hand in the struggle, the one who doubles your joys and divides your sorrows. And then there are the people of the pioneer community, leaning on one another, breaking the isolation with human kindness. They are the threads that weave this wilderness into a society, making your home complete. You look down at your hands. These hands once gripped a woodworking chisel on the soil of England, struggling day after day through labor that offered no hope. Now, in the wilderness of this new world, these same hands have raised a home of your own. They have broken the earth for a fertile garden, crafted furniture for a life of dignity, and more importantly, they have grasped a precious friendship, holding tight to a happiness that is truly yours. The land beneath your feet now bears your name, Ethan Cole. This land belongs to you. It belongs to Finn. It belongs to every pioneer who has fought to take root in this wilderness. It carries the weight of every dream, the cost of every drop of sweat, and the honor of every shared struggle. The 18th century North American winds still blow, sweeping through the dense timber, dancing over the orderly garden rows, and brushing past the two neighboring cabins. But the wind is no longer bone-chilling. It no longer carries the scent of despair. For here, you have a home built by your own hands. You have a brother in arms who stands by you, a partner who will never leave your side. You have a community that breathes with warmth and mutual aid, a hope that grows deeper with every passing day, and a life that is simple yet profoundly happy. You are Ethan Cole, once a landless commoner from England, a pioneer who struggled through the darkness to find the light. On this frontier, you have gained something far more valuable than timber or soil. You have found bond and belonging. This bond is the ironclad friendship with Finn and the warmth of your neighbors. This belonging is the love you hold for this earth and the peace you find within these walls. And this wilderness, this place where you and Finn stood shoulder to shoulder to build a life, will continue to change under your care, watered by time and grit. This land will bloom with the warmest, most radiant flowers and yield the most bountiful harvests. These will be the most precious years of your life, the unforgettable era of your new world journey. This place, once a terrifying forest, has become your forever home.